Fridays are nice in here because the week is winding down, and while I know weekends are still busy, it kind of begins a chance to reflect a little bit on the previous week. You don't have classes. And so in Fridays, we kind of take this opportunity to introduce some reflection time, and this particular week has been what we've called the Mind and Body Awareness Week. And the reason why it's called Mind and Body is because we all know, or have at least all experienced, that our minds have an instantaneous effect on our body. In fact, there's no really solid dividing line between our mind and body. If you remember last Monday when I introduced Rebecca Lyons, if you were here, I went through this little visualization exercise and asked you to bite into a lemon in your mind. And then I asked how many of you salivated with that thought, and many of you did. There was an instant moment where the mind touched the nerves, and the nerves actually created an event in your body in this very brief, inconsequential exercise. So our minds and our bodies are inextricably linked, and you've heard several speakers this week, if you've been able to come, speak about that in their lives. Rebecca Lyons spoke on Monday of her move to New York City and how the changes in environment there and in her idea of herself brought on panic attacks. Some change in the idea of how she viewed herself and her vocation in that place affected her body, her nerves, and led her on a spiritual journey to surrender to God. And that was an important journey that was initiated through her body. Her body told her where she needed to go through her panic attacks. You heard Archibald Hart, professor of psychiatry at Fuller, perhaps on Wednesday, where he talked about the way that our digital world, for all of the goods of our devices and computers, that are 8 hours a day on our devices, which is the average, the norm, is rewiring our brains, making us less able to reflect, less empathetic, less able to worship, less able to connect to God. That the body postures and the ways that we enclose in on our devices actually prevents us in many ways from connecting to others. If you were there Wednesday night at After Dark, John Coe talked about our times when we might be entering into kind of mild depression, or when the things that used to excite us no longer do. And we feel that in our bodies. And yet how this can also be a kind of invitation for what God is doing in our lives. So the mind-body connection, first of all, is real. And second of all, is often hides in it the secret to our vocation, which is to say, what God is calling us to. Probably the example that most of you can relate most to is stress. Stress and anxiety. Most of us feel stress and anxiety on a pretty regular basis. And I say feel it. We don't just think it. We feel it in our bodies. Now there's good stress, of course. The good stress is that little burst of energy you get that says, you've got to get up in the morning. You've got to go to class. You've got to pay your bills. Even you've got to do the right thing. It's that little burst of energy that says, this is important. There are consequences if you don't do it. And that little kind of burst of energy is good stress. It keeps us moving in the directions we need to go. So that's good stress. But we've also all felt bad stress. And this is the inordinate stress that we really feel in our bodies. This is the stuff that we need to look at, because in it may be hidden an invitation to God. This is not just therapy we're talking about here, not trying to feel better. The scriptures themselves are worried about our stress. So for instance, we see in scriptures, let not your heart be troubled. These are Jesus' words. In a particularly stressful time when the disciples were beginning to hear of him leaving, and all of the anxiety and stress, even though they didn't quite understand it, that these words were beginning to resonate with them. Jesus teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, don't be anxious about tomorrow. And of course, Paul in Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything. The scriptures are interested and they care about our stress and anxiety because often it leads us away from God. So if we're going to kind of accept the invitation that stress may open to us, we do have to understand a little bit what stress is. And let me just offer this definition. Stress is the result of the meaning we give to the circumstances and events of our lives. Let me say that again. Stress is the result of the meaning that you give and I give to the circumstances and events in our lives. The things that happen to us, the things that we do, we are always investing these things with meaning. And what that meaning is, and the intensity of that meaning will determine our level of stress. Let's say you've done poorly on an exam. You feel something. You get the exam back, it's not the grade you wanted, and you feel something. Because you're giving a meaning to that. You're giving a meaning to that grade, you're giving a meaning to that event. For instance, maybe the meaning you're giving to it is, this means I'm a failure. Well, that will cause stress. So you're giving a meaning to that. The meaning could be, you know what, I'm not cut out for this major. In fact, this whole vocation I've been imagining, what this paper means is, I have to change my direction. Wow, that's stressful. That's the meaning you're giving to it. And a meaning like that, wow, that's going to be a stressful meaning. Maybe this grade means I'm a disappointment to my parents. They've been really trying to help me in school, and when they learn of this, or if they learn of the final grade that this may lead to, they are going to be so disappointed in me. See, that's the meaning you're giving to that event in your life. The result of the meaning you give to the circumstances will directly affect your stress. You may even think, you know what this means? Is I'm not going to be good at anything, and I'm not going to be happy. Wow, that's a pretty powerful meaning. Is that true? Let's say, for instance, you've texted somebody, and a few days go by, and they haven't texted you back. Well, that's an event that occurs, I'm sure. What does it mean? Well, whether or not you think about it, you will give that a meaning. You will automatically give that a meaning, and it won't be in so many words. You won't say the meaning to yourself, you will feel the meaning. Some deep belief that you haven't even articulated, your body will register. Your body will already interpret it. Things like, does that mean they're unhappy with me? Did I do something wrong to them? Am I at fault? I think I am. Maybe I failed them, and you search back in your memory for some event that might have caused them not to return your text. And you go, oh, that's what that means. They're sending me a message. I've failed them. Or the meaning might be larger. You know what? People aren't, this has happened a couple times before. People, I don't know if they like me. You might start to experience this FOMO, this fear of missing out, Are they doing things behind my back? They're not responding because maybe the friend group has just moved on from me. Maybe that's what this means. Well, it could also mean, by the way, that the person's too busy and self-absorbed to respond to you, which is probably more likely. Most of us get so involved in our lives, we don't keep up with people. Stress is the result of the meaning you give to your life. What I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to answer these questions. And here you're just obeying Psalm 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. Again, the scriptures are concerned about stress because potentially it leads us away from God. So we're just obeying this command when we do this exercise. What has tended historically to make you the most anxious or stressed? And I'm not talking about just this last week, although that may be an example of it. But historically, what are the kinds of things about which you in particular get stressed? Is it school? Do you think back to high school and even now in college? Wow, I really stress about achievement. And again, there's good stress. The good stress is, yeah, do well. But you would say, no, this is inordinate stress. I really get stressed. It could be about money. Money is something to stress over. And there's good stress about money. But you might say, wow, given all the good stress, this is an area where, wow, I really get unraveled here. It could be failures of other kinds. It could be relationships. Wow, I really get stressed when things aren't right with people. And I go into a kind of tailspin. Disappointing others. So where do you traditionally get stressed? And sometimes your body is going to help you here. Your body will be the one that sends the message. So my other question would be, where do you feel stress or anxiety in your body? Because your body will tell you that this thing has huge meaning for you, apparently. In your shoulders, in your neck, headaches, sleeplessness, overeating, undereating. Where do you feel it in your body or behaviors? So to the degree that you'll be comfortable, I want you to turn to a couple people and just take a few minutes, and to the degree that you feel comfortable, just kind of share with each other, yeah, where do I tend to feel stressed or anxious historically, and how do I notice that in sometimes the way my body feels? Where do I carry my stress? Take a few minutes. I'll call you back in about 4 minutes. And now I just want you to take a little kind of solo time with the Spirit for the next 4 minutes or so. And I want you to ask this question. Take this one area of stress that maybe you've identified as historically powerful for you. This one area where there's not good stress, but an inordinate or bad stress. And having just kind of defined stress as the meaning we give to this thing, this event, this circumstance. Again, a meaning that you maybe have never thought about, but it is a deep worldview. It's a deep thing you think or believe. And take a minute and go, so grab this thing now. Grab this area of stress. Is it school? And in particular, try to be as specific as possible. Is it exams? Is it grades? Is it relationships with friends, relationship with boyfriends or girlfriends? If there is a specific thing, grab it right now. And I want you to ask this question with the Spirit. Just take a few minutes. It's going to be quiet. What does it mean to you? You're giving some meaning to this event when it happens to you. And it might be the end that you might indeed find yourself completing one of these questions. This means that I am a failure. That's how I interpret it. Or it means I am not really cut out for this. Or maybe it's something about the future. This means I never will succeed. Or I never will find peace. Or I'll always struggle with this. Or maybe it's about others. Boy, the meaning I give to this is people will not ever really accept me for who I am. Or people aren't drawn to me. So for a minute, take this, and whatever it is, just try to be as honest as you can before the Lord. Say, Lord, what is the deep belief that's driving this? When this comes up, what meaning do I give it? So just take about 2.5 minutes. Well, that is where we'd like to be. So to be able to say in the midst of the stresses of our lives that it's well with my soul. So the question is, how do we get there? A few weeks ago, Dr. Steve Porter opened our series, Spirit and Story, with this statement. He said, we were designed to be filled with the meaning of God and the presence of God. Here are you and I, we're making meanings all day long, we're interpreting events, we're giving significance to events, we're trying to understand what they mean. But you and I were meant primarily to seek the meaning of God and the presence of God, to find places to connect with Him, to hear from Him, to hear His perspective on things, and more than just to hear His insights, to be surrounded by that greater meaning that all is going to be well. Because all of these are forming us into the image of Christ. God is committed to us. That is the meaning that is meant to invest every other meaning that you and I give to the events in our lives. That God holds you, He cares for you, He leads you, and you live in an eternal embrace. That is the meaning that should fill every other meaning. After the disappointing exam and the stress I feel and the meanings I'm trying to give to it, or the text message that doesn't come back, or the friend that hasn't communicated, I'll be investing those with meaning, but I will also want to go to God and say, Lord, what meaning are you giving to these things? What things do you want me to see? And most importantly, do you still hold me? Because my tendency is going to be to catastrophize. That's a good word to use. My tendency is going to be to catastrophize, to take an event and to think the worst, because my fears drive me to it. But God, is that how you see it? Do you see that every event is a possible catastrophe that will spiral out of control? Or is your meaning that you are always present, you are always working, you are always in the business of bringing light out of darkness? And more than that, Lord, more than that insight, I need to be in your presence, the presence of my Abba. I need your perspective and your presence. I need the meaning of God. Jesus, rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. Jesus had a habit. We get this verse early in Mark 1, verse 35, not associated around a particular event where Jesus had to go seek meaning, so he went and fasted and prayed all night. We don't yet have a particular crisis in the Gospels. This isn't right before Jerusalem and the crucifixion, where Jesus is making a special effort to hear from God because there's a crisis. This was apparently his habit. His habit was to create a place, a regular place, where he would go and find the meaning and presence of his Father. We don't know exactly what took place that night, but we know, or that morning, but we know a substantial amount of time was spent opening himself to the Father. He who was very God felt that this was a critical practice for him. So if he can't live without it, can you and I live without it? Or ought there to be a particular rhythm where we shut off the technology, we try and silence the other voices that are telling us what these means, silence certainly in some ways our own voice? What is your rhythm of life when it comes to seeking the meaning and presence of God in your life? Do you have one? Can you live without it? Can you interpret life correctly without it? Can you actually live in the truth that God holds you without it? I don't know if we can. Given all the input you and I get, all the fears that come streaming in through our TV sets and our Yahoo News, given all the craziness of life, given all the pressures that you experience to perform, to be excellent in every way, to experience life at its highest, I don't know if there was ever an age in history where you and I need more a rhythm of hearing God. And even where you and I don't get a message about what something means, like, Lord, should I change my vocation? Should I change my major? Even where we don't hear a message, what we ultimately need is his presence. To say, you know what? Hold on to that question for a while, and you can stay in that place because I hold you. See, I don't think you and I can do without this. And so I would have you ask yourself, where is this rhythm of life going to be for you? Where you seek the meaning and presence of the Father. And sometimes it's good actually just to take your regular rhythms and think, where would be a spot where that would naturally fit? Some of you commute. Well, I think I'll turn off the radio. I think I'll silence the cell phone, which you shouldn't really be using anyway. Although I'm chief of sinners in this regard. Maybe that's your time. That's the natural rhythm to seek the meaning and presence of God. Where you speak to God your meanings maybe. Lord, I'm worried this means this, or this means this, or this means this. You may have to dump that up and then say, Lord, what does it mean to you? And Lord, more importantly, what do I mean to you? Am I still your child or daughter? Do you still hold me? Some of you are morning people. Well, that would be the time. 15 minutes, 20 minutes in the morning. Warm cup of coffee, cold air outside. Lord, I bring to you the things, my stresses, anxieties, the things I actually feel in my body. I need your meaning and your presence. Some of you are night people. Boy, at some point, just turn it off. Turn off the TV. Turn off the solitaire. Turn off the games. 20 minutes at night. Some of you meet regularly with friends. You have a Bible study. This could be a place where together you say, you know what, we're going to, for 10 or 15 minutes, just be quiet together and create a space for all of us to seek the meaning and presence of God about some particularly anxious thing in our lives. And then, of course, you can talk about it with each other afterwards. So part of finding a rhythm, what the monastics used to call a rule of life, is simply taking your regular rhythms and go, where can this go? Because I need it. Without it, I just can't see the world rightly, and I can't connect with God's purposes, and I really can't be filled with the fruits of the Spirit, especially peace. So for a moment, maybe just for a couple minutes, now just take a little more time and ask the Spirit, Lord, where might this go in my life? And some of you may have a memory of this that you used to do. Say, yeah, you know, I used to take time for this. Go back to that as a kind of a clue to maybe how to do this in the future. But just take a couple minutes with the Lord and say, Lord, I need you. I need your meaning and your presence. Forgive me for thinking I can get along without you. Lord, where would this be in my life? Just take a couple minutes. As you hear them talk about their anxiety and their stress, of course, in some cases, it's good stress. It's like normal. But in places where your spirit's feeling, wow, my friend is in distress, you could help them with just two simple questions. Ask them, hey, tell me, when that person said that thing to you, what did it mean to you? Let them have a moment of honesty. Help them discover the meaning they're giving to something. Mirror back to them, hey, what I'm hearing you say is you think this. Do you think that's really true? So help them with an honesty check. What meaning are you giving to it? And the second question would be, what has God said about that meaning? And what has God said about you? Does he still love you? Does he still care for you? Sometimes they will say, you know, I actually haven't talked to God about it. Well, you will be helping them go back to God. You will be helping them seek the meaning and presence of God. This is a way you can become spiritual friends with your friends.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.